Welcome, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to today's Virtual Business Luncheon with Forward Engineering North America. We're very happy to have you and to have Adam Halsband with Forward Engineering in our luncheon today. So I'll just go through a few housekeeping items and get us started here. First of all, for our business luncheon today, around our Michigan office, I just wanted to introduce the main contact points when it comes to events and overall matters. And you want to reach out to our Michigan location, you can always reach out to Marcus Wirt, who is listed here as our head of the Michigan office and manager in consulting services. And you can also always reach out to Franziska Hennig, who is the coordinator for events and always in the background and supporting anything that relates to the luncheon and other events for GACC Midwest. Also, I would like to introduce myself really quickly and talk about some housekeeping items. So my name is Jessica Ferklas. I'm the Deputy Director for Consulting and Corporate Development Services here at the German American Chamber of Commerce of the Midwest, and located in Chicago. And yeah, happy to moderate today's luncheon and looking forward to a lively discussion with our speaker and also with you as the audience. Just for housekeeping, you will be muted during the presentation so we don't get any background noise. We're welcoming questions and would like to interact with you and get you involved in the discussion today. So feel free to type your questions in the chat box at any time that you can find in the panel on the right side of your screen usually. So feel free to type a question anytime during also our speaker time, and in the end you can also always raise your hand and we can unmute you and you can personally ask your questions if you would prefer that. If you do that, of course, we'd love if you would introduce yourself really briefly so we know who you are and get a little bit of a background to your question. We'd also love it if you would fill out the survey after the webinar ends. That's always really helpful for us. Yeah, and today's topic, again, we're here with Forward Engineering, a really strong partner in our network. And Adam Halsband will talk about Forward Engineering, just give you a little bit of an insight who they are and what they're doing, but then really talk about how Made in Germany and success through partnerships is relevant for market entrants and also for companies already here in the US. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to Adam, welcome you again, and thank you for your partnership and for being here today. And yeah, I would like to give you the stage now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jessica. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, hear you very well.
Super. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you to the entire GACC team, German American Chamber of Commerce. I've been fortunate to have worked since 2006, met Mark Tompkins and the team at German American Chamber, and in a number of different capacities had the opportunity to work with the team, and it's always been fantastic. And when we were had visibility to setting up Forward Engineering North America, I knew one of the first things we wanted to do was to become a member of GACC, and I'm thrilled that we are members of German American Chamber and able to participate closely with the team. It's very exciting for me. So I am the Managing Director of Forward Engineering North America. Today, my goal is to introduce you to Forward Engineering while I share insights on our success through collaboration. Forward Engineering North America is a subsidiary of, thank you so much, Jessica. Forward Engineering North America, FENA, you'll hear me use the term FENA, and FE, is a subsidiary of Forward Engineering GmbH. We are a design engineering firm. FE is based in Munich. We kindly refer to our team in Munich as the engine room. And our focus is on composite-intensive mixed material solutions, composite-intensive mixed material structures. And that brings together, as you can see from the triangle on the left, materials, process, and design, or from our perspective, design, materials, and process. And our expertise around materials and process, and you'll see that come up throughout the conversation, allows us to deliver design solutions, simulator-driven designs that are relevant to the market. Our goal is to accelerate the adoption of advanced materials and advanced manufacturing technologies, which happens to be very synergistic with all that's going on in Germany. As a developer of advanced materials and advanced manufacturing technologies, so we're not looking to be butts in seats. We do not replace the engineers with the folks, the companies that we work with. We enhance, we enable, we accelerate the value that those teams deliver. So it's really an exciting, and at its core, a very collaborative type of relationship that we have with the market. So, and we're working, almost Jessica. So we're working up and down the value stream, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So we're engaging with material suppliers, semi-finished goods producers, technology providers, parts producers, and OEMs. And we'll talk about the importance of up and down the value chain. Next slide, please, Jessica. So as I mentioned earlier, in January, we established Forward Engineering North America. Right now, I'm in Royal Oak, Michigan, Detroit. So 11 Mile and Woodward is our offices. We're right in the heart of the Motor City, and then I'll hit on that topic again a couple of times, the importance of the Motor City. Detroit still is the Motor City. This was an initiative that was more than 3 years in the making. Georg and Robert, the founders of Forward Engineering GmbH, and myself and others engaged more than 3 years ago to look at re-entering the North American market, because they had come over and endeavored to do some work. Being a Munich-based company, you can imagine Munich, BMW, Spartanburg, oh, it makes sense to go to the south. Detroit's the Motor City. So we had the opportunity to engage with Robert and Georg and spend an enormous amount of energy understanding the needs, wants, and demands, where German technology and know-how fit well within the North American automotive, North American composites structures market. So our roots are in automotive, but it's really about clean sheet design. So we started out as roading automobilia, clean sheet of paper, high performance vehicle design. It was employing advanced materials, advanced manufacturing that was at the center of that, with a clean sheet paper approach, leveraging the latest design material and process, and objectively looking at these challenges and developing solutions that met the market's need. That was really at the center of it. So as you saw over time, the team realized it was the engineering services that were the highest value. Making cars, people are doing that. Making new solutions, accelerating adoption of new solutions is what folks are really passionate about at the Forward Engineering team. So that brings us, of course, back to establishment of Forward Engineering North America. After 3+ years of hard work, we set up Forward Engineering North America as a subsidiary of FE. And while electrification and ADAS, advanced driver assistance systems, are driving a lot of activity in the West, if you will, when it comes to the critical mass of influencers, the folks that are designing and building high volume production of durable goods. There's an enormous well of resources here in the Motor City, in this Detroit area, and it made an enormous amount of sense. And in our experience through that collaborative effort of establishing FE, proved that out. Next slide, please. So we are an engineering services provider. So from complete body in white to individual component designs, we are supporting the development of innovative mixed material solutions. You can see on the screen there, it's complete body in white, it's parts, it's validation, it's process development. So we speak in terms of simulation-driven design, production-based engineering, because one of the key lessons learned or insights as we were engaging with the North American market, there was no question about the excitement of a lightweighting potential from new materials and new processes. but it had to fit within the legacy manufacturing processes that existed at many of these production plants. So that's one of the key USPs of forward engineering, is our deep understanding of what it takes to make these parts and what it takes to integrate those parts into the production line. So it goes from raw material through the end of the assembly line. You must be sensitive to every step of that process in order to be successful. So while people in the past had engaged in the North American market and said, "Oh, look at this fantastic thing, isn't it great?" It was in a vacuum. It wasn't in the context of, hey, look at these legacy plants, look at this product that I'm dealing with, how are you joining it to the product, where are you joining it to the product? So that again highlights the importance of being involved all the way upstream, raw material through finished product, and that's our approach, and it works quite well. So I did want to highlight over to the right the material, which touches on our material card development program. And this is an example of forward engineering's proactive engagement and collaboration with material suppliers, because ultimately material suppliers have this cool material, but designers can't design with the material without material cards. So the team at Forward Engineering took the initiative to develop standardized, cost-effective material card development programs to help the upstream producers engage with downstream engineers in an effective way. So really an exciting example of collaboration, because that means we've got to proactively go out, engage with material suppliers, engage with equipment providers, bring that together so you can have a comprehensive solution. Next slide, please. And here you can see a graphic representation of the activity cycle. So I've touched a number of times on value chain, upstream, downstream, and the importance with us engaging with people up and down that value chain. At the same time, we need to be sensitive to the activity cycle. Where are we at in that development cycle? What is the technology readiness level of the manufacturing technology, the material technology, the application along that activity cycle? So our experience has shown that it's important to have a clear view along that entire activity cycle, as well as up and down that value chain. And understanding the requirements of those downstream customers and the potential that the upstream suppliers offers is very important part of our approach to the marketplace. So you can see a theme here that's developing as far as how critical collaboration is. It is not uncommon for us to engage or connect with people who feel like, oh, I've got the best manufacturing technology. And especially when we're dealing with our German colleagues, oh, this is a fantastic molding system, or this is a fantastic material handling system. But that's one part of an overall solution, and being able to connect those dots is so critical. So all of this, of course, is only possible thanks to the super smart group of forward engineering, forward-leaning engineers that we have on the team. Our drive to always push forward to realize these cost-effective applications is really at the heart of it. And I keep going back to the engine room, and the team of forward-leaning forward engineers is really an important part of the equation. Next slide, please. So what you see here on this slide is a recipe for success, brackets automotive. I would argue that it applies to many more industry segments than automotive, but just to avoid the what if, but kind of thing, it clearly, definitely applies in the case of the automotive market. You must have a compelling application. You must demonstrate technical feasibility. You must have a supporting business case, and you must have a capable collaboration in order to validate these solutions. So this is the recipe for success. This is something that we have been honing globally since the founding of Forward Engineering, and it is particularly relevant in the North American market, which kind of highlights a topic that's fun for my German colleagues and I to discuss, is the ways that we're the same and the ways that we're different. And very often folks like to highlight the areas where we're different. And I like to highlight, hey, well, we're not so much different. And lightweighting is one of those topics where many beers can be involved in discussing on, oh, well, you know, you guys don't know about lightweighting, you don't appreciate lightweighting, blah, 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 and go for hours. And really it took, well, 3.5 years, 4 years, you know, to realize, hey, it's about the right compromise. It's cost, mass, performance, and understanding what the customer requirements are in this market. So yes, there's some fantastic solutions that are out there. And our North American customers and stakeholders, they understand lightweighting very, very well. They also understand their customer needs. And that brings us to the topic of good enough beats great. And that's a really subtle but very critical, unique aspect to the US market. The clients are only going to pay you for, they only value what's good enough. Great is, it's fun to talk about, but we're not going to generate any business. We're not going to advance any applications. There is no room for science projects, no patience for science projects. It's good enough beats great. And if an aluminum cast solution does the job and I've got 5 plants that are producing aluminum castings, go away. Don't tell me about this other great solution, because you're not being sensitive to what my assets are. You're not being sensitive to how my current bill of process is, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding that good enough beats great, understanding that there is this cost mass performance balance was a really important part of highlighting how we're similar. Because as I began to talk with my colleagues, you know, on the front end, on the business development side, from a European and a Japanese perspective, we were more alike than we were different. You know, so while there were some cool applications going on, it did boil down to cost mass performance, and it was about understanding those requirements. Ways we are different, and this is a really, really important one, an obvious one, I'm sure, to many of you, and that's around collaboration. So we don't have the Fraunhofer. Now, I just had a call the other day with FBC, Fraunhofer Project Center up in London, Ontario. Fantastic facility, great people. That's in Canada, different country than the US, but still on balance relative to Fraunhofer, AZL, and many other facilities, we don't have the infrastructure in the US like you have in Europe. We don't have decades and decades of culture of public-private partnerships. It's much different in that respect. Since the 80s, you could argue, with the downturn in automotive, as OEMs push product development to the tier suppliers, you could see the shift in how the industry went around developing new technologies and new applications. And the burden was, to a great extent, shifted on the tier supply base. And culturally, or what have you, the US has not been good at public-private collaborations. Now, IACME is a fabulous facility, IACME Lift, and the work that those folks are doing is great. EWI down in Ohio, fantastic facility. On balance, it's the exception, not the rule, with respect to collaboration, and to, from our perspective, to realize these cool technologies from Germany and to get traction and to accelerate the adoption of these technologies and materials, it required proactive, private level collaborations. And we have spent an enormous amount of resources on the front end from a business development standpoint to facilitate those types of collaborations. And it has proven phenomenally successful. Now, mind you, it's much different. So when we're talking to suppliers of technology and materials from Europe and discussing these types of approaches, there was hesitation for sure. So it wasn't until folks were realizing success and we were able to cite some successes that it's become a little bit easier. But it's still much different, Europe versus the US, and these collaborations that we're proactively leading have been a central part of the success that we're seeing. Another key difference that I'd want to highlight is failing fast and fail early. You know, fail fast, fail early. Failure is an option. That's a significant difference, and culturally something that needed alignment with to get used to, if you will, between my colleagues in the engine room and what we were doing here. That our North American, our US clients are happy to push forward and break things on the front end to learn very quickly what's important. And it's okay to change your opinion on things and choose another tact based on new information. And this is something that took some time for folks to get used to. It's like, oh, well, we said this is the direction to go in, and now you're saying we got to go in this direction. Well, you know, there's a lot of discomfort around that. Well, hey, there's new information. This is a new situation. This audience has a different level of expectation. So we need to be able to pivot and adapt to that, which brings me to one of my favorite quotes, and it's an Albert Einstein quote. If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solutions. Now, I know that might sound counterintuitive to the fail fast, fail often type approach, but it really isn't. It's complementary. It's about alignment. And even the best multilingual speakers that we have on the team, there's cultural differences. There's differences in the way we approach things. So we spend an enormous amount of time on the front end to make sure that we understand the customer requirements. So from a business development perspective, there's a lot of front end work and in work packages associated with at risk with making sure that we're aligned around what are the problems that we're looking to solve. And that ties back in again of what's the value of lightweighting, its cost mass performance, and understanding what the real wins are. So yeah, just want to highlight that. So I guess I'm going a lot faster than I thought I would, Jessica. I'm getting to the latter portion of the summary.
I think I can, if we want to be more now in the panel style, I could unshare the slides at this point, or do you still want to use the slides?
No, that's fine. We can unshare it, and then I'll just kind of highlight these last few points here. You know, we've been leading with technology in Germany, advanced technologies. There is a demand in the North American market. The market here recognizes that, values the German technology as far as materials and manufacturing is concerned, in design and simulation. The proactive work around bringing the right collaborations together is really important. As I mentioned earlier, it's not uncommon that we'll work with somebody, oh, I've solved this material problem. Well, it's part of the overall equation. Who else can fill out that complete solution? So yeah, so taking a leadership role in those collaborations is really critical and central to our approach. Yeah, I think that's the key points, Jessica.
Yeah, I think one point, and I do really like that Albert Einstein quote when you talked about planning, the planning phase of, you know, that is more of a European mindset probably, where the planning phase is longer and then the execution phase comes at a much later point because the planning phase is so much longer, and that there is a fail fast and more of an iterative process, I would say, you know, here in the US. So maybe you can, I wonder if you can maybe elaborate a little bit on your best practice and your experience, because you are, you know, you have that experience, I assume a lot where, you know, you're talking to your engine room, which I really like that you know, you call it your engine room in Germany. And there are probably different expectations sometimes, or maybe it's even with, you know, bridging that gap with what expectations are maybe for your US clients, and what the planning structure is usually for FE in Germany. And maybe you can talk a little bit about how you support with communication and with just expectation management. Yeah, what your experience are there to bridge this approach of planning longer versus of the approach of having an iterative process.
Sure, absolutely. And you hit it on the head. The expectations, the level of maturity, So first, as I was engaging with the engine room, if you will, to keep it simple, there were some expectations that they had. And it took a little bit to figure out, oh, wait a second, I'm having this conversation with these folks and they're expecting a certain level of maturity about the requirements, but in reality, it isn't as well defined. And the people, our clients that are asking these questions are comfortable asking questions without knowing the answers, asking questions without those questions being fully baked, without being ready. They're not afraid to ask stupid questions, if you will. I mean, that's to put a sharp point on it. Completely not afraid to ask stupid questions. And whereas my colleagues are, well, hadn't they thought about this? Didn't they think about this, this, or this? No, that's why they're coming to us. They're asking us to think for them because we're a services provider. Now, so that's one way to look at it. Another interesting experience I can share is, so we're working with an OEM around a e-mobility type of challenge. And the OEM didn't know what they didn't know and didn't know how to ask for this. So the types of questions they were asking were confusing. So what we did is we went very big. We said, okay, this is everything. This is everything about this application, every single aspect about that application. And it took a fair amount of effort for us to scope out something that was much bigger than ultimately we knew it would end up being. The value, the how much that client appreciated that front end work that we did to help them, that 55 minutes that we spent to allow them to get to that 5 minutes that we spent was really key in solidifying that relationship with us, you know. So they valued that enormously. It allowed us to then focus in on the important aspects by doing that front end stuff, and then we can very clearly define the scope on the smaller portion of the problem, focus the team. So it took us going through that whole this is out of control to, oh, okay, now we help them understand what the problem really is. Now we scope it forward, and it was very rewarding.
Yeah, and that's also, I think, how you described it, you know, to go from the big picture into, and then breaking it down. I think exactly how you described it, and just how this is a typical phrase here for us, right? Where we say you need to break something down in something bite-sized, that's relevant, that's concise, and, you know, where you hit it on the nail. And sometimes you have maybe to go from the big picture, but it's also been my experience, you know, supporting market entrants, that's a really important process. And maybe also from the German or European side, it's really helpful to have that background and have the big picture, have the details. But then if you go, at some point you need to come and break it down. And I think that's an important point you're making. That's, you know, where we have to adjust to each other's styles.
Yeah, and we had a meeting the other day actually around this, chunking things down to bite-sized pieces. And we have a saying here about, you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. The thing is, you assume, you know, we're going to eat an elephant. And this was exactly the conversation we had the other day. It's like, okay, you assume that we're talking about an elephant, but you know what? It's not an elephant, it's something else. So we need to segment this thing in a different way and identify where we want to start eating this. Maybe it's a tiger, you know?
Right. And we don't know what we're tackling yet, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Another one thing that I thought was really important, you touched on, you know, in your case and for your industry, which organizations you're working with or are a member of interact and collaborate, and also use for networking, and the importance of, I say networking, you know, I think you referred to it as just, you know, having those collaborations, having those partners. And you were touching on IACME or EWI, so very relevant industry groups. And for FE, maybe you can talk a little bit about the timeline, you know, how early and at what point in time as a European entity, or in general, if you want to open up a market and become a thought leader, you know, and get engaged with other players? How early do you want to do that? You know, if you want to be successful here in the US?
Sure. So I mentioned that establishing FENA was 3+ years, almost 4 years of immersing ourselves in the market. My background, I started in automotive in the 80s, so I had contacts and friends that go back quite a ways. You know, the German American Chamber has a phenomenal network of contacts. We intersect each other. It's not uncommon for us to be talking to the same people. So in many respects, GACC is a proxy for the type of person I was when FE came over here. So we were able to begin the conversations, and it was very, very early on, within 6 months of us starting the conversation with key stakeholders across the value chain. And we were talking upstream, midstream, downstream folks within the target industry to understand their pain points, to understand what they really valued. It's production-based engineering, it's legacy facilities, it's complete solutions, these types of things. So once it became clear what was core to forward that the market valued, then quickly we needed to participate in industry events. And we participated in IACME events. We participated with the Society of Plastics Engineers presenting at their Automotive Composites Conference and Expo, participated in ACMA, American Composites Manufacturing Association, worked with the Steel Market Development Institute and Auto Steel Partnership. And that was one of the funnest things, bringing my German colleagues, hey, Automotive Composite Solutions, and you're taking us to a steel association? Look at it. It's steel and aluminum. You want to put a composite part on that car? Guess what? You're likely going to be attaching to something that's steel. So it's talking to everybody, and that's maybe an American thing or a U.S. thing versus others. You know, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So abstracts takes a year ahead of time, 6 months to a year ahead of time to submit abstracts for trade events. And you're submitting those well ahead of time. Collaborate with other folks along the value chain. Don't present on your own. Find another partner. Okay. At least someone says, well, at least that person thinks what you're talking about is relevant. And so we've had some great successes with co-presentations, as I mentioned, SPE, ACMA, IACME, and I know I'm forgetting some. But yeah, so that was. So if we go back 3.5 years, 6 months, figure out USPs and engagement, then start working with these trade associations. You're presenting at their key events on an annual basis, and eventually you're fortunate enough to be invited in as guest panelists. And in the past year, we've been fortunate to be invited in as panel speakers or consulting on trade events and things of that as a thought leader. So give you a rough idea of the timing.
Yeah, so you really, I mean, what I'm hearing is you really start early and then you become known and people remember your name and your organization, and then you get into these also panel discussions, right? So I think that's also just encouragement, you know, to our listeners and to our membership, that just to also not, you know, maybe not after the first participation, now we have to look how these trade events will even look now and going into the future, but just that it also takes a little while, you know, to build that group, to know. I just know from other companies also saying, you know, you get to know the booths next to you and you get to know those people and they will get to know you, and then you start doing these joint presentations, getting in front of people, and it might take a little bit of time, and yeah, it might be a little bit of a different approach. And also, yes, that association, you know, maybe we can also touch on that. The association is not your customer, right? I mean, and the question is always, for if you come in the market, if you want to establish yourself, you want to get in front of that customer eventually or as soon as possible, and you need to have that value proposition to, you know, be here in the market, etc. But also, how you put it, there is a very important value in having these networks, because sometimes maybe you have some experience you can share. sometimes those leads can come from directions that are maybe unexpected, or there are a lot of the time they're indirect, right? I mean, maybe you have some experience with that as well.
Sure. I think, and you brought to mind a really important topic with respect to automotive for sure, and I'm sure relevant to many other industries. We've been making cars in Detroit a long time, and while many of my European colleagues might look down their nose at what was going on here for decades, it shows when you walk in the room. They see that. So gotta watch that. That's one thing. And the other thing is, there's a lot of know-how, and there needs to be respect for that group of people. They have networks and relationships, and then you just come in, and why should they work with you? You just flew in. Oh, that's great technology. Where are you going to be 6 months from now? And you kind of mentioned it, Jessica. You know, you've got folks that have come in. Oh, I didn't get any leads. This is a bust. What a waste of time. It's like, wow, if that's your perspective, you really shouldn't take on this market. If you think coming to an event, you're going to generate sales right away, 1 year, 2 year, I think that's unrealistic at best. It's an investment in the space, immersing in the space, demonstrating to that market that you're committed for the long term. These are important factors. The decisions that many of these folks are making are on products that are 3 to 5 years out. Now, obviously, we're not talking about consumer products that come and go in minutes or what have you. We're talking about automotive, where you're doing development and investment and validation. So you need to have staying power. You need, you know, there's a saying at breakfast, the chicken's involved, the pig is committed. So your eggs and your sausage or what have you, they're looking for that commitment. Being involved, there are many suppliers that have come over, oh, we're supportive, we're involved, and where are they when the times get tough? And lightweighting is a really good example of that. Folks that came early on, oh, I'm going to give you a super lightweight solution. Well, you're missing the problem. You're not even asking, what is the problem that we're trying to solve? It's a mass cost performance. It's customer facing. Do you understand what those customer needs are? And will you be here for the long haul and not just swoop in? So networking events are fantastic. You're not going, you know, it's unusual or unlikely that you're going to get an immediate sale from those activities. Level set your expectations. What do you hope to accomplish with these events? Gathering insights on the market landscape, understanding who the key influencers are, understanding what the messages are that are relevant, both from a market perspective and then keynote speakers, what they're projecting. You know, bring sufficient enough resources. People, don't hide in your booth. Go into the keynote speak. Go in and participate in the events and the panel discussions and listen to what's being said and ask the difficult questions.
Yeah, really good. I mean, when you were just saying, if you're at a show and then level set your expectations. So what is the goal to get out of this? It's discussion, it's learning, it's making connections. And then the question is, yeah, how fast is there going to be a sale? I mean, if there's possibly one, that's great. But you know what we hear all the time is when there's a first time trade show participation, or maybe a second time, and just then culturally, from the German side, you know, there's usually the first response is very excited after a show, because there has been very just positive, friendly people here at an event that got excited. And maybe, you know, a little bit like you said, you come into a room in Detroit, maybe it's not even an event or a big trade show, but it's a smaller, you know, get together. People are like, yeah, that sounds interesting. You know, that's new. I want to learn more about it. Tell me more about it. Yeah, and then it's a little bit maybe also, let's see where this goes. And the takeaway sometimes is, I think there's a disconnect sometimes of what, yes, that's interesting, and I'm excited about learning about your new technology and what that actually means and translates into, especially in the short term. And then there's, you know, sometimes a little bit of a disappointment on attendees that say, hey, I thought everybody was so excited about my product, and now I'm emailing them and I'm not hearing back. And then, you know, just managing those expectations. I don't know if you've had experience with that, maybe with colleagues from Germany also come over, and then trying to, see if, you know, besides the information gathering, you know, what else does this mean, this participation, and where do we go from here, and maybe how you've guided folks in that regard.
Sure. What I've seen for sure, and this is beyond FE, this is, you know, we work with a number of material and technology providers from Europe, from Germany, that we're helping. Obviously, friends call, hey, we're interested in this, that, and the other, and we're helping them meet with folks. And there's so much preparation that's done. Our German colleagues are fantastic on that front end work, and they, like myself, get really excited about their baby. This is my baby. And at times they can be overwhelmed and not maybe ask as many questions about, okay, what are your needs? You know, being sensitive to the application requirements. It's not exactly analogous, but, you know, along those lines was the discussion about carbon fiber versus composites. So early in the days of lightweighting, people were charging over cost-effective carbon fiber. And it became such a distraction because people were fixated on this very expensive material and very narrow set of applications, as opposed to the enabling capabilities of thermoset and thermoplastic composite materials, which is a much broader category of materials, and understanding and presenting it in such a way that they didn't get shut down. So a lot of front-end preparation, need to really understand what the unique set of requirements are in this market, and make sure you're listening well. I guess those are some of the observations.
Yeah, making sure you're gathering what is actually being, what is being said, but also how, you know, how it's meant, and if you're not sure, to ask that question again. Yeah. And while I'm talking about asking questions, so I just wanted to encourage the audience again, if there are any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you do want to raise your hand and do want to engage and just you know, ask directly, that's also an option. So anytime, if you want to write it in the chat, that's one option, and if you want to just raise your hand, that would be the other option, and then we'll be on the, my colleagues will be on the lookout if there's anything coming up in the meantime. Yeah. Yeah, so I think another one, so you've been, you know, also talking about this role of also working with other companies that are entering the market. So maybe, you know, that are even that are, you know, develop in the developmental stages. They're not as far as forward engineering is, but there's still an engagement. And of course, you're also looking to the peers here in the industry, or even the competition. Yet, like you said, you keep your enemies closer. You want to work with them or get experiences, but you're also looking to, or you're up, like you're saying, you're engaging with companies that are, you know, on another level. And maybe you can also talk a little bit about, even if companies are just coming in and maybe they're not even there yet, maybe also what you look at, because that sounds like more of a, you know, that's more of a long-term also investment of your time, and what kind of benefits you see there, and, you know, what you can recommend for other companies here that, yeah, just how to evaluate who do you engage with, but then also you must be making these conscious decisions. You know, I'm also talking to companies that are maybe not as far, and like what kind of benefits you've seen, and how, you know, how you've evaluated that involvement.
Excellent. So I probably should have spent more time on the value chain and activity cycle, because what you're leading into fits well with that. And understanding where you fall. Most people have a pretty good idea of where they fall along the value chain. It's pretty obvious. I make a raw material, I make a semi-finished product, what have you. What people tend, and this is across regions and so on, what people tend to lose sight of is the activity cycle. Where are we at in the activity cycle? What are the key milestones? When do you realistically anticipate to have success, and then back up that schedule and build out that schedule and understand what are the activities and events, what are the things that need to go on between now and then. So we've got value chain, activity cycle, what are the events that need to go on with respect to the value chain, who are the people that are going to win and lose as a function of you making these things happen, and that goes to your point, Jessica, of who you partner with. There are other people that will benefit from this happening. So it's not uncommon for us to see collaborations where there are competitors involved, where there's people who would otherwise be competitors, but they benefit from moving this ball forward, because it's not you against you, it's you guys against them. So it's getting that clear picture of that value chain, who's adjacent to you, who's going to benefit from these things happening, and at the same time having a objective and clear perspective on that activity cycle. What does it mean to get that material on that product? Who is going to underwrite those development works? It's not uncommon for us to deal with folks that say, oh, well, this is this great thing. Well, who's going to generate the material card? How's the designer going to design the part with that material if you don't have the data they need to put into their simulation software? What's the formability of that product? You have this clear vision of what can happen. They don't. You need to be able to connect the dots, and that's where you're pulling in those partners with common interest and coming in with a complete solution. This is part of that formula or recipe for success.
Yeah, and you really, you talked about how you go from all the way from the materials, from the might be powders or what have you in your case, and just also thinking about those value chain connections. And I think I am staying with it because I think sometimes it seems far-fetched for people, or it seems like, do I really need to have such intensive relationships with all of those players in the value chain, all the way up and down? Also, yeah, but yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think what we have run into probably most often is smaller, nimble, innovative solutions providers, whether it's materials or technology, being skeptical whether they can emulate what the recipe that the bigger folks are doing. I mean, there's clear examples. Everybody who's on the call in this meeting can think of the mega players in their space, whether it's automotive or others. Oh, well, they've got engineering, they've got testing, R&D, they've got all those things, and it seems so big and unattainable that it's almost discounted. Oh, we can emulate that? Well, when you narrow down that focus, when you really understand what the requirements are, and you strip that down to the minimum viable product, and don't worry about all the other stuff, you can pull the right team together. And it's really about pulling the fewest number of people together to get that done. Anytime you get more than two, it's very exponential, the complexity, but you've got to do it sometimes 3 or 4, but you figure that out. And they can be successful. And as I mentioned early on, there was a lot of skepticism about the viability of those private collaborations. But as we were able to demonstrate more of them, people say, oh, okay, we're focused on a specific problem set. You've validated that hypothesis. Now that took leadership on the part of a client. I mean, there's a limit to, there's a certain amount of hypothesis validation that we're doing on the front end, but some of the companies that we work with take the initiatives. They get it. Okay, we're going to work together, develop a hypothesis. We're going to go validate that hypothesis, and then come back to the other stakeholders that are required, that critical mass of people, and show them the work that's been done. And that's really the peak of the collaboration successes that we've seen within the past year, where we're able to go back to, and a classic example is material supplier goes to a tier supplier and says, here's the problem. It's been validated by the downstream customers. This is how you solve the problem. Will you work with us to bring this to market? And the tier producer was blown away. They're like, what? No technical data sheet? No, no asking me what I should do. You're telling me what the opportunity is, that front end work. Fabulous success.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that actually is an awesome way now that we're going to getting closer to close the session, because you're really describing. So my main takeaway would be you're really describing having a collaboration and even sometimes keeping your enemies close and working with people that are new to the market. It's not going to result in a loss. Of course, everybody plays their cards in a smart way and in a thoughtful way at the same time, but really it can result in tremendous success for everybody involved. And there doesn't have to be this, yes, there is competition and you need to look at that too, but if you can tweak it into a collaborative situation where you can show added value to your OEMs, for example, in the automotive industry, then make sure you don't miss jumping on that train with fellow partners in the industry.
It's not a zero-sum game. When it comes to developing, it's not winners and losers. If a group's going after an opportunity, it should be a clear indication to you that there's an attractive space there. So if nothing else, you've benefited from the clear market development and research that group has done. And just the sheer questions that are being asked lead you or provide you insight and guidance on what are the sensitive areas. So there's so much that can be learned in these collaborations, and whether you're part of that final group of minimum viable collaborating partners really doesn't matter. I mean, it's great if you can be, but it's not critical and shouldn't prevent you from joining in, if you will.
Perfect. Yeah, I think these are perfect remarks, and I know, and I really appreciate all your thoughtful insights for the audience. When it comes to, I mean, we touched on so many things. We touched on, communication, on the relevance of networking, and just considering that there is value, even if it might be indirect in certain connections, even if it's not obvious to you right away, and even if at a trade show or at an event or conference, it's more about exchange in the first step and about exchanging ideas, being on a panel together, discussing, and then but maybe you then get an introduction, or you find an opportunity for collaborating, and you get invited back, and then you can become this thought leader that forward engineering also has been becoming here in the US, which I think is just a tremendous example for everybody listening.
It is definitely a marathon. It is not a sprint. I'm sure many of the attendees know that. It's obvious, but it is. And in the technology players, we've seen people come and go. It really is the folks that demonstrate the staying power, the commitment, and the listening that end up being on top and working together.
Yeah. So Adam, thank you so much today. Thank you for your continued partnership. We love working with you. We're looking forward to another event around lightweighting with a German delegation coming up in the end of October. If some of the audience that is something that's of interest that folks would like to learn more about, that's certainly something we can share in retrospect. And also, we definitely want to invite everybody. We have events coming up in the month of October. October 14th, we have a workshop around recruiting and updates for HR during COVID and how to handle these matters in the current state. And then also on October 16th, we want to invite everybody to our awards gala, where we give out awards to leaders in the German American business community. again, October 16th. That is at 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern. So we'd love to invite you back. And again, thank you so much, Adam. It was a great discussion. Very much appreciated. And I hope you have a great afternoon and the rest of the audience does as well.
Thank you so much, Jess.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye-bye.